All right. The hairstylist claim. Oh, yes, Lisa, sorry, I was, like, reading your message. Hey, Army Tanker's wife. Yeah, some of this is gonna be this one's even heavier. Today's is a lot heavier than the last two have been even, and this one gets a little intense. We're gonna do a quick 30-second countdown and get going. All right, this one's going to be a little bit longer, so we're going to hop right in. I'm going to say hi right quick to those of you that are here. The rest of you, I will say hi as we're going through this. Cool Gamer, Marie, Daisy, hello. Okay, let's get going. There is some stuff that I'm going to be addressing later today on my other channel. Another thing that I want to note, there's a lot of posts going up currently about an active pew-pew situation on a military base in New Jersey. I just want to let everybody know that that has been taken off. It is all clear, has been issued, but people still have their posts up and have not redone them to say that it's an all clear. I know that everybody is on high alert right now because of the situation in Maine last night, but we've got to be mindful that we are kind of provoking fear too, and there's levels. Also, another thing, if you've never been in my chat before, never commented on my page before, never showed yourself anywhere around anything I've done, but then I share a live stream of somebody who's having an interesting, good conversation of things that should be highlighted in the communities around here, and you come on that post and tell me what I should and shouldn't do with my channel, you probably are going to get told to F off, period, point blank, end of story. So save your BS for somebody who cares, because it's not going to work. I can't stand this stuff. Like, we're goddamn adults. Because you don't like somebody, okay. And like, I can't stand that shit. It is like fucking elementary school out here so often. And I'm like, okay, you don't like that person. Sweet. And the conversation was great. And I encourage more of you, if you are part of the Summer Wells community, to go open your freaking eyes and see what's going on. Okay. Hey, Melanie. Oh, yes. Yeah, he has been in the middle of it. Steph B, Cutie Pie, Juju. Okay, well, let's get going because this one's a long one. I got my drinks ready because this is a lot of reading. You guys can see it good on your end. Okay. We're going to go over here. Today, I shouldn't have to end or anything, so hopefully we'll be able to get through both of these statements. Now, just to clarify, once again, these are the statements of the married couple. This is from the second lawsuit. Hey, Revival. This is from the second lawsuit that has been filed against Tim Ballard and Operation Underground Railroad. This goes back to 2022. So the previous statements of the victims were basically stemming through 2021. So this is the second lawsuit. It's a separate lawsuit that was filed. Yes, they are civil lawsuits. No criminal charges have been brought at this time. However, hopefully that will change going forward, because in my opinion, there definitely needs to be criminal charges. And there's a whole lot more we're going to get into. And don't worry, I have a Faith Friday. No, probably a Take You to Church Sunday again with Lil Feller coming up to you again, because he just is the content that keeps on giving. So with that said, let's get going. Hey, Marcy. Hey, Aurora. Oh, you're okay. They'll all be here. It's just important to get these out, in my opinion, get the statements out here and let the victims' voices speak for themselves. That is really important to me to highlight this. So we're going to keep going. And for those of you that missed it, earbud warning, because this is kind of loud, but I did get us a button. So I figured we'd start off with the button today, just to remind you who these people are. I think it's loud, so be careful.
Whoops, you're in a cold. Whoops, you're in a cold. Whoops, you're in a cold. Whoops, you're in a
Whoops. You're in a cult. Okay. Statement of AA. If you missed the previous part, we read through the entire opening documents of this. Now we are at the victim's statements. Again, this is all alleged. This is for entertainment and educational purposes only. This is directly from the lawsuit website. You can download yourself if you would like to. And here we go. Okay, statement of AA beginning. Tim first approached me when I was working late at the office in October 2022. I was getting ready to leave the office at 7 p.m. He was there. He told me he was there to film. Later, I found out he was meeting a lady named Lori, who also does readings. Tim often calls Lori, the psychic, for advice on many things, i.e. operations, lawsuits, and daily Tim crises. Tim walked into the office of my boss at the time, redacted. The name was redacted, the office, and shut the door. It was just me and him. He asked me if I was ever interested in doing operations. I said, no way. I was working towards being in aftercare. At this time, I was an employee of OUR. I laughed, saying, I don't picture myself breaking down doors in combat boots, as that's the impression I always had with operations. He told me that operations were not all just that there were a lot of female operators, and some of the best operators were female operators. He elaborated and said he was in the middle of an operation and needed help and thought I could help. I didn't talk much, as this was the first one-on-one conversation I had ever had with Tim, and I thought it came out of nowhere. So I was trying to wrap my head around what he was asking and make sense of it. So she would have been after the previous victim statements, this timeline wise. He said there was a case he hopes I could help with in London. So new location too. When the operation started, the female operator he used couldn't take any more time off work, and he needed a female partner. He explained that the female partner is there to pose as a girlfriend when they are having conversations at a party. He explained that this operation involved his team encountering a trafficked female, and he needed more information from her. To do that, his ops team was required to fly to London. Tim needed a girlfriend present. This new role would be there to befriend the trafficked girl during the party while they would try to get the information they needed from her. He said every detail counts, even as small as him returning with a girlfriend. He told me he kept asking God, who should I bring? I need someone who can pull this off. He said he was driving down the road and saw my face, which was crazy because he doesn't even know my name. Then he apologized for not knowing my name. Dimitri, his bodyguard, opened the door, cluing Tim in to get on with it so that he could move along. Tim asked for my number, and then I went home. The following day, Tim called me and asked if I could fly to San Clemente, California for an ops training. It was the same time that the board meeting was happening. I told him yes. He told me repeatedly that all of this needed to be a secret, and it was essential that ops was on the down low. I didn't find that weird, as no one at OUR talked about operations. It was all very secretive. Shocker. When I got to California, Dimitri picked me up. Dimitri and I got some lunch, and he checked me into the hotel I was staying in. I remember Dimitri asked, so why did Tim fly you out here? I told him, honestly, I didn't know how to answer that. Tim told me not to tell anyone anything. So a few things were going through my mind already. Number one, is this a test? Number two, am I in trouble for flying to California since I'm still so confused about what Tim was asking me to do? And number three, why is Dimitri asking me? Shouldn't he know? Looking back, I can tell now that Dimitri's response was clear that he was annoyed that I was there. He was annoyed that Tim was up to something. Tim called me when Dimitri and I were getting lunch. There was music in the background, and Tim got mad. Where are you? Why are you not at the hotel? I told him we were finishing lunch and then checked into my hotel. At this time, it was about 2 p.m. Tim told me he would come by my hotel soon. I still didn't ask questions and just said, okay. It was approximately 6 p.m. when Tim got to my hotel room. I remember feeling very uncomfortable in the hotel room alone with another man and afraid and shy to say anything. I also thought, this is Tim Ballard. I should feel differently. He was explaining roles and operations. I go by Brian Black. When I'm in the role, I will be Brian Black. Think back. We've heard that before. He started to explain what the couple's ruse is. 2 operators can block each other in strip clubs and massage parlors. It will cover any suspicion of the operators being the good guys. He gave an example where if in a strip club, the stripper wants to sit on his lap, his girlfriend can block that from happening by sitting on his lap. Another example was while getting information in the massage spas, while getting couples massages, trying to get information if the traffickers try doing anything to either one of the operators, The safe word is fuck me. And that is the clue to get your partner help in being sexually harassed by saying, get out. We want to be alone now. Traffickers can smell pheromones, so we must have real chemistry during the couple's ruse, or the traffickers will call us out. We've heard that numerous times. Tim said he had rules so that there is no kissing or touching private parts if he ever does a couple's ruse with anyone. I remember saying, is HR going to pop out of the closet during this whole conversation? Because he didn't say any of this to me before I got to California, and I couldn't believe I was hearing what I was hearing. The role he asked me to play still needed to be clarified. I was led to believe I was helping with a case in London, but not in the context of a couple's ruse in that way. That differs from how it was explained to me in Utah at the office. Essentially, Tim wanted me to befriend a girl they were trying to save in London that they had already found and believed she was trafficked out of North Korea. Pay attention to that piece because that's going to come back in a minute. Tim continued to talk about chakras and tantric massages. It was all very confusing, but I just wanted to help however I could. Trigger warning, everybody coming in. Hey, everybody, thanks for being here. These are heavier ones, just so you guys are aware. These are a lot more detailed and they get pretty heavy in this. So, but don't worry. When it's over with, I've got a whole book to tell you guys about that will help save the world. Tim continued to talk. Okay, we read that. When he left, he hugged me and lifted my shirt to look at my stomach. He said he had no idea I had such a hot body because I was always so covered at the office. My back was facing the bed and it was easy to fall back on. He pulled me in tighter and kissed my neck. He said that kissing my neck up and down would avoid kissing lips. He had me lay on my back on the bed to show me how to fake fuck while our clothes were on. One of the positions he showed me was he wrapped one of my legs over his neck and began to thrust, explaining it would show as if his DICK was sliding in me, but going under me without actually going in. He told me another female partner came up with this technique and it works all the time. They were able to save hundreds of kids this way. It was so uncomfortable, but I dismissed it because it was Tim Ballard. And what did I know after all? He was the operator. I was someone he was told could help break this huge trafficking ring coming out of North Korea. Tim then left and said he and an operator would return later. He came back a few hours later, but was alone. He told me an operator would follow us in a different car and I wouldn't see them. It was all part of the training. He said they would text him throughout the night and give us tasks and we would need to do them. This shows if I can pass the tasks assigned. We first went to dinner and he said he got a text that said we needed to get in the hot tub. I told him that was dumb. We were at the Four Seasons in California. People may recognize him. I did not want to do it, but I did it anyway. When I was in the hot tub, he took his shirt and garment shirt off and mentioned he sees angels all around and that this isn't wrong. Afterward, he took me back to the hotel. I went to bed. He returned to his uncle's house where he was staying. Tim instructed me to keep this information, tactics, or events private from anyone else. The next day, he was in board meetings most of the day. I was doing strength training with Matt Cooper, which consisted of nothing unusual, just workouts on the beach. We ate dinner at Tim's uncle's house that night. I went back to my hotel room alone and then flew home the following day. Pause. We've got a visitor that wants to come join us. Come on. I should just know that he's going to come in and interrupt every day. I'm not aware if anyone else at OUR knew that I was there that weekend or ever knew I was an operator except for Blank, the CEO at the time. Brad was fired. So is Brad the CEO. Did they forget? I don't know. Brad was fired only a short time after I started doing operations. Blank texted me one afternoon to check up on me. Tim always wanted me to tell him whoever was talking to me about operations. So I let him know that Brad checked in on me. Tim later told me he called Brad and yelled at him for going around Tim's back. Brad is the CEO. Yeah, okay. So they redacted it in part and then they didn't. And it can be intimidating for me to get a call from him. That was weird. But again, I ignored it. But ultimately, I was embarrassed. My operations were and always have been a secret. I was led to believe this was because operations is confidential. I don't think my boss, redacted, CFO, COO, knew I was going on operations. I was not allowed to discuss it with him or tell him. This made my job very difficult. I was in all day-to-day business operations and projects. Then at night and weekends, Tim had me doing the Tim Ballard brand and traveling abroad for operations. I didn't get any additional pay. I did not expect or ask, as that was not where my heart was. But I felt Tim was putting me in unfair situations, and I couldn't voice it because he was the founder of OUR and must have had good intentions. One day you will make lots of money, he would always say if I would start to bring up any compensation relief, which was never my goal to do. Sorry, guys. I'm extremely dried out with this stupid sinus stuff. It was making things difficult for me at home. I was away from home more and more with no extra pay or real reasons to explain to my husband, FT, that no position title change made sense on why I was doing what I was doing or salary change, which logically makes sense elsewhere. Simple questions couldn't be answered like, am I covered insurance-wise if I'm on and off? Tim had me spying on everything in the office for him, which made it really weird for me relationally, as I was close to everyone. As I said, I was in everyday business operations for 6 months before Tim. There was always something or someone doing wrong to Tim in Tim's eyes. So he wanted to keep me in everything and report back to him, but it burnt me out. So she was basically keeping an eye on everything for Tim. First practice op. Guayaquil. This took place in Guayaquil. Tim was accepting an award, so he thought we could do a practice operation there to make sure I was prepared to go to London and not screw it up. We checked into the hotel, and he said he ordered a massage to come to the room for a couples massage. I kept telling him I was so nervous. How does this go? What should I do? What should I say? Who is it? His response was to go with it. There was a knock at the door. Tim opened the door, and 2 girls were there to give us a couples massage. I looked at Tim. He got completely naked and lay on the bed, stomach down. I was wearing black shorts and a blue top. I lay on the bed, belly down, with my clothes on. My face was towards his, and he said, "Why didn't you take your clothes off?" I said I didn't know what I was supposed to do, so I sat up and took my shirt off. I laid back down, and the girls gave us a massage. I don't speak Spanish, but Tim does. They were all giggling. I asked Tim what they were saying, so it looked like I wanted to be there. Tim turned me on my side and said he was complimenting me on how hot my girlfriend's body is. He would translate what they said to me. He told me he was asking them how much they self-pleasure and asked how they self-pleasure. One of the girls wanted to show him how they self-pleasure on me. This is what I'm reading right here. Oh, it's probably because it's... Anyways, the M word right there. I remember giggling to play the part, and Tim rolled me on my back. I remember closing my eyes, wanting it to be over. I didn't remember the safe word then. I was only remembering that I wanted it to be over. Heavy trigger warning on the next part. I heard Tim say he had never seen this done so close, and he was getting a lesson. I felt fingers inside me. When I comprehended that, I stood up and went to the bathroom. I heard the girls leaving. I got in the shower and cried. Tim came into the bathroom. It was a glass door, and I turned around because I didn't want him to see me or see me cry. But he said, "You did so good. You're such a badass. No female operator did as good as that. We are going to save so many kids," he said. He said he got a name from them that will provide kids, and I should not be sad or feel guilty about anything because we would not have gotten that trafficker's name if I didn't do any of that. None of it made sense. I remember feeling so disgusted with myself and shoving all of it away because I just wanted to help, and I thought, this is how operations work. I told him I would be out soon, so he left. I got out of the shower, dressed, cut his hair, and got ready for the night. We all went to the award ceremony, got on a plane, and flew home. Nothing came of the practice operation. I never heard of checking back in with the trafficker's name that they said they'd got that night. So he didn't assault that person himself, but he had the massage therapist assault this operator, in my opinion. From his, yeah. Okay, practice op in Mexico. Tim had a CPAC in Mexico. God, Tim, I got a perfect person for you to go to CPAC with. Her name's Blowhorn Betty. Anyways, Tim had a CPAC in Mexico. I went with Tim, Dimitri, and Matt Cooper to have another practice leading up to London. Mind you, in between these practice operations, the text messages and constant reminders of how important it is to keep everything a secret were a continual reminder everything was for the greater good, the new covenant. We got to Mexico City and we had a 3-bedroom Airbnb. Me, Coop, and Tim stayed there. So Coop is back around again. They ordered 2 escorts. They told me they heard that one of them knew traffickers. I wasn't sure how the night would go. There was never a real plan. I always asked, and he said it was impossible with operations. We had a goal, but besides that, we just got to improvise. I found comfort in not speaking Spanish. It took the pressure off slightly. The 2 escorts came over. I stayed in my room for a few minutes. Tim showed me off as his girlfriend. When I walked into the living room, the party continued. There was alcohol and just conversation going. I was asking Tim to ask them questions for me. What do they do for work? What is it like being an escort? How much money do they get paid? Tim told them I was interested in being an escort, but I elaborated in letting them know that I didn't know how to do that sort of thing. I was using that as a defense and getting out of what I felt was coming, which was Tim wanting to be alone with Julie in the back bedroom. So Julie is one of the escorts. My saying I didn't know how to do that work got me in a worse position. Tim said, let's have blank teach you. I didn't have a choice. We all walked to the back bedroom. Tim lay on the bed and Julie got completely naked and crawled on Tim. She was talking to Tim, telling him to tell me guys like this, guys like that. I kept my clothes on and sat on the bed. She asked him why I was shy and still had all my clothes on. Tim asked, and I said to tell her because I don't know how to do any of this, remember? The other escort that came in the bedroom and allowed us to break up the sex escort training session. When Blank left, Tim asked about the kids and traffickers they knew. Blank elaborated and said that she could help get us information. She wanted to return the following night, but to hang out with me. The second night with Julie in Mexico. That night, it was just me and Blank. I elaborated on the character as the girlfriend wanting to become an escort, just asking her questions, becoming friends, but ultimately seeing if I could get any information about the traffickers she allegedly knew. As I talked to her, I told her I owed Brian, Tim, a lot of money, so I needed to become an escort like her. How do I do it? She told me that I needed to get in these groups, and to do that, I needed to provide boudoir photos. She also said that she could provide kids sold in these groups on WhatsApp. I could get in these groups and meet the traffickers if I provided boudoir photo pictures of myself. Tim was all for the pictures being done. I got the pictures of myself and sent them to Julie. Julie sent them to her WhatsApp group. By the time London was here, Tim had me looking online at escorts anywhere we went, wanting me to order them for the night in hopes we could get any information on trafficked kids. He was convinced the new way of finding trafficked kids was through escorts. Tim had me make profile pages with escort agency ads in my boudoir photos. He had me book escorts for every night we were in London. 2 escorts came one night and he told me to wait down at the bar for 20 minutes. When I got upstairs, they had just gotten out of the shower. The girls were surprised that I came, so they left. I was relieved. The next night, another escort came. He told me to wait downstairs at the bar for 20 minutes. I was downstairs with Coop and told him I didn't feel that this was right. I don't know much about operations, but why must he be alone with escorts? I walked upstairs. Tim was in a robe and on the bed with the escort. I walked over to the escort and started talking to her like she was a friend, which ultimately killed the mood. I befriended her, as that was my role for the London app anyways. So I felt good enough to do that instead of engaging in anything sexually, and I did not have anything in me. The real op in London. We had one big suite and hotel rooms. This big suite is where the party is going to take place. The objective of this operation was to get additional information from this girl to confirm that she is currently getting trafficked. To do that, we also needed to order her through her agency. So we did that. And then she met Coop at his hotel room. Tim and I came in. I was introduced as his girlfriend. He talked about chakras and tantric massages. He was explaining where the chakras were. He had me straddle his lap and he was demonstrating where each chakra was on me. Then he said we were going to take a shower. It was almost a production. We walked into the bathroom. He turned on the shower and made sex noises to make the individual think we were having sex in the shower. We got out and walked upstairs to the party to get the needed information. Once the night was over, we were happy she provided the information, but there has always been one major factor that never made sense to me. Why did I need all these practice ops, including things that didn't come close to what he had made me do before London, for London to be a success? Okay, another op. This is too much. After London, Blank wants to meet up with us because she has information. The operation started terribly from the beginning. We missed our flights and our luggage was rerouted to another state. We arrived in Mexico City late that night, but still met Julie and two of her Ukrainian escort friends. Blank was the case we had been working on for a few months. The point of this meeting was to get more info from Blank because she kept saying she had friends who were selling kids in escort group chats on WhatsApp. Tim wanted Blank and Tim wanted Julie. They left an I right there of the redacted, so that's got to be Julie. They did a terrible job redacting some of the shit. Tim wanted Blank, which would be Julie, to bring Ukraine escorts because she was working on a case from Ukraine. Before they left, Tim told them to come back the following night, which led to having to get more money for their time. The following morning, we met with a public official. I left the meeting early to see if our bags were back at the hotel and to withdraw more pesos to pay for Blank and the two Russian girls, while Tim and Matt Osborne stayed at the meeting. When Tim and Matt were on their way to the hotel we were staying at, I told them I would be late due to traffic. I was already texting Blank, letting her know to go to the bar to buy time so Tim and Matt didn't need to be alone with them in the room. I was under the impression that any op would start once all the pieces were in place. When I got to the hotel, the girls, Tim and Matt Osborne, had already been in the hotel room. Tim and Blank were on their way down alone to the hot tub. The three of us crossed paths as I was getting off the elevator. They were getting on the elevator to go down to the hot tub. I was taken aback by the situation they created for the whole day, and I was disgusted. I remember testing Tim with the statement, "I will come," and he said it was just them two going. I share this because it debunks the couple's ruse. Tim and Blank would be in the hot tub alone. Matt Osborne was alone in the hotel room with two other girls when I was supposed to be their blocker. This was more of a get together, as me and Julie had essentially already developed a friendship over the past months. Still, I thought I shouldn't voice this with the bit of experience I have in operations. We had two rooms and one suite where we were all meeting, one regular room right next door. Matt Osborne was in the suite with the two girls, and I was too upset to go in there for various reasons. First reason, I'd been alone in Mexico City trying to get pesos out for Tim. We met with a potential trafficker the night before in the hotel we were staying at. The op started without all things in place as discussed. All my personal information was being exposed via the front desk. Therefore, the TV was on when I entered the room because they were ordering room service and playing music. My actual name was on the TV, not my undercover name. These women came over with the impression that they were being paid for sex, but I believed we were paying them for information. I believed we had a plan in place so sex wouldn't be involved. Tim going off alone with one escort was unnecessary. That debunked the couple's ruse. After seeing Tim go to the hot tub with the escort alone, I walked into the regular hotel room to regroup. I texted Matt Osborne to let him know I was back, and he asked me to give him 5 more minutes. I thought that was strange. I chose to dismiss, thinking he was just in conversation getting information. When 5 minutes was up, I knocked on the door. Matt had makeup on his face, leading me to believe he was kissing one of the girls. Okay, hold on for a moment, because Matt Cooper was involved in a lot of the couple's ruses in the previous statements that we heard, especially like the strip clubs locally and stuff that they were doing on these practice ops for the other victims. But if you put the pieces together now, she's naming Matt Osborne as the one on the couple's ruse in California. And Matt Osborne and Dean Martin were the ones that confronted previous victims at the gala and were complaining about Tim's practicing at the strip clubs. Do you guys remember that? Doesn't that seem fishy to anybody else? Anybody else find that odd? Why would Matt Osborne have complained about what was going on at the gala to a previous victim, but now he's a part of the couple's ruse in California moving forward a year? Hey, Running Bear. Hey, SL Conley. I find that to be really freaking weird. Hey, Moonlight View. Something about that just sets me. Who wasn't involved in this shit at this point? Seems like everybody was involved in this. This is just, and these are the people that ran OUR. These are board members, COOs, CFOs. Like, we're not talking just other operators. We're talking about professional, supposedly businessmen and women who ran OUR, a multi-million-dollar organization, a 501c to save trafficking victims. But yet they all seem to be involved in these escorts and stuff. Anyways, okay, carrying on. This is just weird. Shortly after I arrived in the room, Matt got a text from Tim. Tim asked if we could all leave the room because he and Blank were on their way up from the hot tub and he needed a little longer with her. So Matt, the two girls, and I went to the restaurant downstairs. It was approximately 30 minutes. And then Tim texted Matt and said they were done and we could come up. We all got upstairs. Tim had a robe on. The shower glass doors had water on them and her bathing suit was on the floor by the window. Matt Osborne left almost right away. I talked with the girls for about 10 minutes and they all left. Tim told me immediately that he found himself in a tricky spot. I remember listening with disgust. He then said she wanted to have sex with him so bad. And when she went to get the condom, he hurried and self-pleasured. So by the time she either turned around or walked back, he was able to tell her he couldn't have sex anymore. He told her, "You're just so hot. I had to do this instead. I'm so sorry," he said. Bullshit. Excuse me. I am going to interject here for a second. Bullshit. Oh, SL. Interesting. See, Jessica Mouse was a part of OUR in the beginning, but then the new Jessica that was a part of Spear Fund, I think it's Jessica. I have to go back and look. It was a different Jessica. She's an ARNP out of Hawaii, and she was focused in aftercare. That was supposedly what the Spear Fund was set up for. But she has been removed from their website now. And she was on part of the Angel Studios breakdown when we talked about that. I was in there trolling them and asking them questions. And they didn't like it. But she was the blonde one in the lower left-hand corner under one of the Harmon brothers and that. But she's no longer on the website. That was another Jessica. But Jessica Mass was with him from the beginning. But then this other Jessica, there's another Jessica too. Maybe name change. I don't think so. But shit's weird here. This is freaking weird. Hey, Lorraine. Exactly. Moonlight View. Dark Horse, right? Crazy. This is just. Okay. And by the way, if you go to get a condom, I mean, he would be like the 2-second man, not even the 2-minute man, the 2-second man. So I'm not buying that at all. Sorry. I just got to say it. There is no way. Yes. Okay. SL, I know who you're talking about now for sure. I thought there's so many crossovers because of the family members and all that stuff. But I was thinking that's what Jessica Mass, she's the one that when they were on the operation, and I think Haiti might've been Dominican Republic, that he claims that she rescued the kids with the key. And there's a picture of her with a key. I'll get back to that later, but what the hell? I mean, really, Dark Horse Justice, what a disappointment. That's why I don't buy this. I don't buy it at all that was, I buy it that he told her that story, but you can tell that she thought it was bullshit too. I mean, come on now, people. And this is why the question comes to mind too. I'm going to say this again, and I'm going to say it very boldly. This is why it comes to mind. What about the females in all the countries that they went to, between the 20 and 30 countries that they went to? Is there victims there too? What about the victims, these escorts and massage workers? What about them? Can you imagine how many people have not came forward yet? It's really horrifying to think. In doing all that, he said he got information that she wanted to meet up in Playa del Carmen, where her friend was selling kids. I didn't respond to him on any of this. I remember being unable to say anything. After a couple awkward seconds of silence, he got an ignorant and rude attitude. I remember he said to the effect that I should be grateful because he just had to sacrifice needing to do something like that to get information from Julie. I also remember feeling bad because we were there and the plan was to try and get information from her differently. I didn't deliver though, so I was grateful he got the news. So hopefully we can save kids now. He then elaborated on how much he has lost and sacrificed, and I now remember feeling bad for accusing him of doing something wrong or judging him, leading me to ignore and forget how this all happened until now. January, I told Tim he needed a team of people to rally around him to help with how busy his life is. He needs more employees. I suggested 2 individuals that I already knew from the office. These individuals had been with OUR since the beginning, and I thought he could trust them no matter what. He created a department called Founders Group. They had kickoff meetings at our Miami office over a weekend in January. I didn't know they had an office in Miami. When he returned, he told me he would take one of the individuals on the upcoming operation. I told him I did not think that was a good idea, but Tim knows best. He works off instinct, and that was that. The operation he was taking her on was the takedown of a 3-year process finally ending. It was also strange, taking someone on there at such a high risk with the potential of compromising and losing any of it. I was going to Mexico 2 days earlier to finish the blank operation with 2 other operators. I was going to see Tim and this other individual for just 1 day before I went home, and they went to start on their operation. Tim and this individual arrived at the safe house alone, which implied they traveled alone to Playa del Carmen, where we were all staying. I was checking with Tim's new female partner, and she seemed good. Tim did the final meeting with Julie and me, and nothing came of this. Fast forward to mid-March. Tim, myself, and the OUR development team were in Miami for a speaking fundraising event and gala. So this is 2023 now. It's got to be. So we started in 2022, October. Now we're at mid-March. So this has got to be 2023. Tim always liked filling the time when we were traveling. So we pulled the list of escorts near the area, and he wanted to do some bodyguard tactics. There were 2 other operators as well to help him with this operation and accompanied Tim's security. We rented a 3-bedroom condo and 1 other condo in the same building. Right before the speaking event, Tim got a call informing him that his lawyer, Brent Anderson, was flying into Miami to inform him that the individual he brought to Mexico in February had filed a complaint. Previous victim. That would have been the perfect time. Oh, God. He wanted to be with him personally to tell him the news. Tim was so upset, dry heaving and throwing up. Poor fucking baby. He gathered himself up enough to speak at the event and return to the condo. By that time, Brent was there. The 3 of us talked briefly. Tim was very detailed about what had happened the whole week with him and that other individual. He claimed his innocence and that nothing had happened. Then Tim brought Blank, an operator, in Tim's security for the weekend to speak on how operations work. Tim told me not to have Blank come to the condo until he told me to. He was always particular with details. I never knew why Blank was not able to be there when Brent arrived. Brent put Tim's mind at ease, letting him know that they would do an investigation so that they were covered if anything came back in the future. They could say they performed an investigation and Tim was innocent, which makes sense. Give me 1 second. I think he is. I think he works for Kurt McConkie, but let me see. Oh, no, he doesn't work for them anymore. Huh. I don't know if this is the right guy or not. I'm going to have to look into that further because Holland and Hart, he works with Holland and Hart. Here, give me a second. I'm going to show you guys what I'm looking at right quick. Hey, Quartz, good to see you. Hey, Keith. Hey, True Crime Dime. This is the attorney. Hey, Nikki. That is Tim's attorney that flew over there, just so you guys are aware. I'm going to do some more digging in him because I have questions now. Okay. Brent put Tim's mind at ease, letting him know what they would do in an investigation, blah, 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 blah. We went through that. Once we got back to Utah, all my updates on the investigation came from Tim. No, I didn't switch it back to you guys. Sorry. I was working from the Linden office and traveling a lot. I never saw anyone from the main office. How many fucking offices do they have? Honestly, this is weird. They have one in Linden. There was some weird house, if you think back to the previous ones, now a Miami office. Tim kept asking me to write a complaint letter to OUR regarding sexual harassment and harassment against OUR because the individual lied about me when this happened. Earlier, she had told me that people in the office were uncomfortable with me being an employee, but later recanted and told the investigators that was untrue. This allowed Tim to tell me that this individual is jealous of me as a fellow employee, leaving it accessible for him to cause tension and mistrust between me and this individual. He was playing them against each other, in my opinion. I never wrote a complaint to OUR or told Tim I didn't. Why would she? Yeah. He was trying to keep the divisive tactics going. I talked to HR one time. The conversation consisted of me expressing confusion with the whole situation. I couldn't wait for it all to be over, but that was that. Again, these people were my friends. I wouldn't say that. That's, again, my opinion. Tim told me he repeatedly would ask Catherine to write a complaint to OUR. Catherine is his wife, for those of you that don't know. He told me she didn't want to do it. He called me one day from this car. He was reading her complaint to me out loud, but I could tell he was erasing and editing sentences as he was reading it out loud. I told him he should not turn it in, and then I got off the phone. That was none of my business. Tim had me out of the main office when the investigation started, and I was not talking to anyone except him. Tim painted the narrative for me and even resigned for me. Tim resigned for her? He isolated me, making sure I had no access to any information. He told me what to say. I remember answering questions, but still leaving things out. I remember now. He coached me on all the things he wanted me to say. He convinced me that the individual was lying. He went as far as saying this individual was obsessed with him. She wanted to marry him, be his wife when he was the president of the United States, and physically hurt Catherine. He told me she was trying to put cookies on his doorstep to poison Catherine. That definitely has a ring of the Tammy, what happened to Chad Daybell's ex-wife. That's the scary shit, y'all, and that's my opinion, but that's the scary shit about this stuff, is it's way deeper than people are realizing. In a way, it's probably a really good thing that this is all coming out before something like that did happen. That's, again, my opinion. He painted her out to be this crazy person who became obsessed with him during an operation, and he couldn't escape her. He said all they did was hold hands. I knew if I elaborated on anything in my interview, it could ruin OUR. All operations would stop and no kids would be saved. It came time for my interview with the investigator in charge of the case. That day, Tim called me all day. He wanted me to meet before to ensure I was prepped. I never did. He was constantly repeating, no drinking on ops, no kissing or touching private parts, over and over and over. I remember telling him I didn't need coaching, as I would say. I stuck to the narrative that Tim painted for me. Now we're going back to February. By this time, I am an undercover operator and employee. I understood that my boss, blank, and HR finally knew I was doing ops. OUR and Tim thought it made sense to move me to be only with Tim since I do operations and have been doing tasks already for Tim. I was hesitant but hopeful for a simpler schedule and better work-life balance, which had greatly affected my marriage and home life. Between travel and being at Tim's Linden office, I was not at the main office that much. Tim was sorting out issues between himself and OUR. I was getting all my updates through Tim and no one else. I slowly lost all contact with everyone at OUR as I was just busy with everything Tim. In my opinion, that was a tactic of isolation. Again, my opinion. Koreatown, California, December through July 2023. So we are right up to the release of The Sound of Freedom, which was July 4th. Well, actually, it came out July 3rd in some places. Tim said he was getting intel from spas coming out of Koreatown, so we made a couple trips there and visited some spas to see if there was anything we would come across. We walked into the spa and asked for a couples massage. They didn't do them, so he ordered one for me. Trigger warning. Tim said he would wait for me in the waiting area. The spa was tiny, 3 rooms and a waiting room. It was all close enough to where I could hear everything happening. I went into the room, undressed, got under the covers, and lay on my stomach. The girl came in to massage me. I could hear Tim talking to the other girls at the front desk, which kept me at ease. I asked the girl a couple of questions, but half through the massage, Tim was gone. Another worker came in and told the current girl to leave. She told me to turn over so she could massage my feet. A few minutes into the foot massage, I glanced down because I saw the light. I caught the girl recording pictures or video right up the sheet as she gave me a foot massage. I noticed the door was open 3 inches, so when I went to move and ask what was happening, the manager walked in and started cleaning up to distract everything. I didn't dare stick up for myself when I caught the girl recording or taking pictures of me because I was left alone in the spa with 3 potential traffickers, and I was supposed to act like I would like that, but I didn't have a way out of it since I didn't have my blocker. I got dressed and sat in the waiting area for another 10 minutes until Tim returned to pick me up. I asked him where he went. I was upset because he was never supposed to leave me alone. He told me he went to find more spas. Oh, this is just February 2023 to June 2023. I moved over to being all things Tim Ballard, employee and operator. He would constantly tell me I was the best operator. No one had ever done ops like me before. We were going to save so many kids. He had never trusted anyone as much as he trusted me, and everyone had betrayed him. He said that he would put a bullet in his brain if I ever brought up the need to move positions. I handled all personnel, Tim Ballard brand and operations. I was prepping for the Sound of Freedom tour and speaking gigs. Tim was also trying to implement Operation Bodyguard, which consisted of couples or 2 operators going undercover anywhere, spas, clubs, ordering escorts to rooms, and trying to get intel from them. He was convinced that the escorts were the way to get all the information on human trafficking and that the couples' ruse would thrive through Operation Bodyguard. He was planning the initial training in the DR and had me reaching out to couples of his choice to coordinate a time to get there. This never happened. June 2023 to September 2023. Tim was telling people he resigned from OUR because there would be a conflict with the Sound of Freedom, and he wanted to start the Spear Fund. I always felt weird about that because I was with him on June 9th when he got his termination letter from OUR's board members and OUR. He never gave me clear information. Okay, so right there, pointing that out. Exactly, Mike. Exactly. Stonefly, hello. This is just crazy, though. Like, this is the manipulation tactics. And I have to take it back to my understanding is this couple is not LDS. The LDS women, and I'm not trying to like make any difference about that because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It's all manipulation and coercion, in my opinion. But he really picked specific people, it seems, to isolate and control the women. Like, he was very intentional about his movements, about who he was selecting, again, my opinion, and how he was setting up the excuses and the excuses. But this right here confirms that he was terminated from OUR, which we have found out many times before. I mean, I don't think most of us question that he was terminated from OUR, but they went on this whole campaign thing. Every time you asked any of them for a statement, what happened, why Tim wasn't with OUR anymore, they would come out and say they didn't have a statement. He's just moving on to different ventures. It was a conflict of interest with the Sound of Freedom, and OUR covered for him. But not only OUR, Glenn Beck, Tony Robbins, all of those guys went on a whole campaign. Granted, a lot of them are executive producers on the Sound of Freedom, but they knew he had already been terminated from OUR. And they still promoted him as this hero. Meanwhile, knowing that an internal investigation had already been done and he had been let go because they could prove what was going on with the victim's statements. Think about that. I agree, SL. Yep, Steph B, 100%. Lisa, the last time she made a public statement, she was pro Tim Ballard. He didn't do anything wrong. This was just a smear campaign. All of the things. It's been pretty quiet in Ballard camp lately. They won't really talk much. But she went on a heavy PR campaign right after these came out in defense of him. and said that, he was just doing his job. If you think back to the interview on Adam Carolla's show, she was really heavy hitting for him. But you could watch her mannerisms. I wish we had a body language expert to break that interview down, because she, in my opinion, again, this is just my take, but she was so uncomfortable and trying to just go along with the story she'd been told. Could it be a case of Stockholm syndrome with her? Absolutely. But again, I question her motives too, because it sounds like she knew a few things here and there, but her shady shit with children and families in itself is enough for me to have issues. So I don't know. I don't know. It's really hard for me. Was she just part of the ploy? Absolutely could have been. She could have been. I don't know what she knows, and I don't know if we'll ever find out. But I hope that at the end of the day, she's okay, because I can't even imagine what living with a person like Tim Ballard has done to her self-confidence, her self-worth, her mind. I don't think she's intentionally a terrible person. In fact, she's pretty your typical Mormon mom of 9 children that kind of follows in line with their husbands. They are to be seen, not heard. And I hate to say that, but that's a lot of the old school mentality in Utah, especially. Again, Utah Mormons are completely different than the other world of Mormons. I have to say that all the time, because people don't understand. And these, again, it's not just the LDS beliefs. He used all of that to manipulate and coerce, in my opinion. At this point, for all we know, Catherine could be a victim of his. If you think back to the previous victim statements, too, one more thing before we get back into this. There was something that really stood out to me, and I mentioned it a couple times yesterday. But Catherine didn't want to be waxed because it reminded her of a young child. And that was Tim's sticking point all the time, was all of his female operators had to have Brazilian waxes. And Catherine didn't want to be waxed because she felt that it was too childlike in a way. And again, I'm paraphrasing. I'm not reading the exact thing right now, but there is SL. I just moved out of Utah. Oh, one more thing before I forget. I got to share you guys this. So you guys know I've been covering this stuff since July, like since this came out. So last night when we got done with the live stream, look who called me. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They called me twice. But that's not the first time they've called me. October 13th, they called me again too. What are they doing over there? What do you want? SL, but now I'm like 10, 15 miles away from the Mesa Temple. So I'm kind of in the same ball game. Isn't that freaking hysterical though, that they keep calling me? And this is from the Phoenix Church of Latter-day Saints too. I was cracking up though, because I was texting with Am and I'm like, what the hell are they calling me for again? And the missionaries keep showing up here. I've been live numerous times when the missionaries have came to my door. Yeah, SL, absolutely. They've came to the door twice. I'm like, they found me already. And if you know, I used to say, when we actually visited the Scientology building in Utah and took 6 missionaries to a tour of the Scientology building, we were all cracking up and like making jokes throughout the entire time. Kyle and I are neither denomination. So they came out, and it's not a joke. They took pictures of our license plate and everything. It was the weirdest shit. We will talk about that someday too, because it was the craziest shit. But now I'm like, the church is following me. I've never been a member of the fucking church, thank God. All right, not that cult, different one. And we're going to get into all of that too. Okay, back to this. June 2023, September 2023. Tim was telling people he resigned. We got into that. She was with him. Okay. He kept me so busy with tasks and me just consoling him daily that I didn't even have the mental capacity to think about getting logical answers to anything I asked. By the way, hi, Nikki. Suppose I did ask a question that deserved a logical explanation. Tim always responded with the crisis he was dealing with. Imagine that. So the subject would be different, and we would be talking about him again, fixing anything he needed, or complimenting him, telling him it's going to be all okay. How exhausting. I would then feel bad for whatever he was going through and for asking such questions. typical switching the subject to change the direction. Isolation and control, in my opinion. I personally never had a conversation with OUR about resigning myself. Tim did it all for me. I was under the impression that I was only leaving to work for Tim. I was told OUR was giving Tim Spear Fund a year's grant to cover my salary. Tim or Spear Fund has not paid me. I have not received any salary while working with Tim or the Spear Fund, only partial reimbursements. When I got a separation and release agreement, the wording needed to be more apparent because nothing was adding up. After all, I thought I was only resigning and not being terminated. My husband was the only one who brought this to my attention when he read the fine print. There were things in there mentioning I was not rehirable. Why is that? I asked him and didn't get clear answers. I don't believe I was given a fair chance of leaving OUR in a friendly manner. I never knew Tim's narrative as I could not be involved in any conversations. I have been violated and taken advantage of while working in day-to-day business operations tasks at OUR, ops, and an employee, all while being asked to keep it a secret from everyone I know. Never mention it to anyone. No one understands. This is for the greater good in the new covenant. We had to be married in past lives, he would say. I resigned from OUR under a narrative that I had no control over. Tim kept me so busy and isolated from other operators that I never had the chance to understand true operations and all right protocols. I was never able to have any communication with them once I left the Spear Fund to understand the full scope of what was going on. OUR knew the total capacity of what I was being exposed to and did not care to reach out to me in any way this whole time. Instead, they did the opposite, keeping me in operations, putting me in the role of being more available to Tim Ballard. I believe Tim had me join the Spear Fund as a cover to protect himself from these other women he knows he violated for his gain. Tim had a habit of asking me to cover for him on many things. One in particular was asking me to take blame for dirty text messages he said was a tactic that we used in operations on our burner phones. He was always so worried that they would leak out. Over the past year, I have distanced myself from all my friends and family, thinking it was because I was so busy with work. Still, it was because I couldn't relate to anyone in normal conversation with the things Tim was having me do. That was in the name of God through revelation and saving children. This happened through Tim's mind games and manipulation, guilt trips, and last-minute crises, especially when I would speak my mind. I felt I needed to clean up all of Tim's crises that he would throw at me, even when it would supersede my family and personal life. Working for Tim has cost me relationships, my marriage relationship, time away from my family for 1 year. I have burned bridges for this man without knowing it. I've gone in debt for him, and when I would bring it up, it always would come back to a personal crisis Tim was going through. I would feel guilty for asking for a paycheck I never received since June. What? Or for covering his expenses this year. How is she covering his expenses? Since I resigned, I've been able to breathe and realize this was all mind games and manipulation for his personal gain that I will never understand. How is she covering his expenditures when he was set up with the severance package and Spear Fund? Why was she? I can't wait for discovery. Let me just tell you, I cannot wait for that day because this man is a millionaire. And she had to pay for things and never got reimbursed. Crazy. Tim's reoccurring comments to me: traffickers can smell pheromones. We are doing this for the greater good. This is all for the new covenant. I see angels all around. Catherine chose you. These aren't our real bodies. Jesus gave our bodies to use like this, referring to the couple's ruse. Our bodies are a tool. I would do anything to save a child. How far would you go? Janet and Lori said you would never turn on me. The two psychics are Janet and Lori. Janet Roussan, and I'm not sure which one Lori is. You are the only one who could ruin me. I wanted to put a bullet in my brain before you. I will put a bullet in my brain if you ever leave me. Constantly said this. All right. That is the female's statements. Probably SL. I'm sure it is. It's totally fine. I just find it hysterical, though. Like, I find it hysterical that they were calling me as I'm covering this stuff. It's just random. They get a hold of stuff like that. They really want me to be a member. Do you really think that they want me Me to really be a member now, people, come on. I definitely don't fit the whole thing, but they will try. They will try hard. Okay, now this is the husband statements that we're going to get into. This is pretty heavy too. Statement of FT, surviving Tim Ballard. I have been dreading the thought of writing this down and having to relive what has been the absolute worst year of my life. Worst year or so of my life. The last few months in particular have been the absolute nightmare as things started spiraling and I felt helpless and desperate to save my wife and my family from the grasp of Tim Ballard. This one's pretty heavy. Tim has taken everything from me. He has purposely destroyed my marriage, manipulated my wife, ruined the relationship with my kids and my wife's family. He has gone as far as harassing me at my place of employment, thus affecting my ability to do my job and earn a living. His narcissism, ego, sexual deviancy, and actions have caused irreparable damage in my life. He has taken my dignity, my home, my self-esteem, and pride. He has used the most noble of causes to manipulate vulnerable and well-meaning women, including my wife, to do unspeakable things and brainwash them into submission. I think he is truly evil and a dangerous man with a Messiah complex who used the name of God in the guise of saving children to fulfill his own narcissistic desires, deceiving many people along the way, stealing the valor of actual victims and exploiting their painful personal gain. I believe all of his actions are very deliberate, calculated, and cunning. Can I get an amen? That he said it all right there. You've never been called by them, Helen. Right, SL? Yeah, they definitely don't want me. They definitely don't want me. I know. Moonlight, you think I get a type will recommend with my sleeves? I mean, as long as I cover it up properly. Can I get it? This man said it all in one paragraph right there. Right there. That man has broke that down perfectly with what we have seen. This is exactly what this person is. And he's affected many people. Okay, here we go, because he's going to give, this is very well done. Context. I feel in order to tell this story, I need to provide some context on AA, our marriage, as well as myself. Prior to our introduction to Operation Underground Railroad, AA and I had a very good marriage. We've been married for 10 years and together for 12. Like any marriage, it was not perfect, but it was filled with love, affection, care, trust, and devotion to each other. I have heard numerous people refer to us as a power couple or mention relationship goals when referring to us. Take that for what you will. I believe we both deeply cared for each other and most importantly, trusted each other. I have never in my life trusted anyone more than AA. Because of my trust for her, I never got jealous, often to her playful annoyance. AA was always the light in every room. She had a very bubbly personality, an incredible infectious laugh, and made everyone feel special and loved. She was selfless to a fault. She was and is truly an amazing person. She also had a passion for kids. She was unable to even get through a movie where kids may be harmed. AA worked from home as a blank, running a fairly successful home-based business. I work in blank, which allowed us to have our evenings, weekends, and holidays together. Our free time was usually spent with the kids, with AA's family, being active, or just bumming around the house. We were always very affectionate with a healthy sex life. We had both been married before, so I think we had healthy respect for this being our second marriage and wanting to do it right. Since AA's previous husband traveled a lot for work, which eventually led to infidelity on his part, from my understanding, it was important for AA to have a stable and boring life. She said she always wanted someone to be home at nights, someone who she could trust, someone who wasn't always on the go, and someone she felt safe with. So I took that to heart and tried to provide that lifestyle to the best of my ability. I also wanted to point out that the kids are not biologically mine, but from very early on, they became my kids. I wanted to be the father I never had, and I wanted AA to feel loved every day, probably to a fault at times. The irony of this is that the very little things AA hated about her previous marriage is what Tim manipulated her into becoming. I'm going to expand this a little bit so you guys can see it a little bit better. Okay, you guys can read it better that way too. Okay, I should mention that I was always very financially conservative and somewhat of a minimalist. I still drive the same 22-year-old car. When we met, I felt the need to provide financial stability for her and her kids. I never had a need for a fancy lifestyle, and I felt that I would rather sacrifice instant gratification to take care of what needs to be taken care of. The kids never went without. They still participated in sports and dance. We went on family vacations and had plenty of experiences. We just didn't live lavishly, even as our financial position improved. I wanted to touch on this because eventually, because of AA's involvement with Tim, our finances started spiraling out of control. Introduction to OUR fundraiser. Sometime in the summer of 2022, AA was introduced to OUR. Her passion immediately took over, and she decided to sponsor a fundraiser for them. She worked tirelessly over the course of a few months to make that happen. Once AA gets passionate about something, she becomes obsessed with it. I helped her as much as I could, helping leverage some relationships to get donations, setting up websites, running some of the finances, etc. The fundraiser took place in August of 2021 and was very successful. She had a great turnout and raised close to $25,000. Looking back in hindsight, it's quite sad to know that $25,000 probably didn't even cover one of Tim's operations, considering the 5-star hotels, first-class tickets, and alcohol bills I would later come to see. Community outreach. After the success of her fundraiser, AA was offered a job at OUR working in community outreach. She was in charge of the volunteers for several states. It seemed like an entry-level position, but again, AA gave it all she had. She attended and supported every event she could, even covering for her counterparts who seemed to not take the job as seriously. Again, I tried to help when possible, volunteering at multiple events, running booths, selling merchandise, etc., all for the good of the cause she so believed in. Every dollar raised was going to help us save a child in her mind. Simon Brewer. AA applied for and got the job of blank to blank, the CFO and COO at the time for OUR. She didn't have much experience in that field, but she had a go-getter attitude and was willing to learn. Many evenings were spent with me helping her make spreadsheets, word certain emails, etc. Blank treated AA well, and I was always ensuring she made work-life balance a priority. Family reunion, meeting Tim Ballard, meeting Janet Roussan. Summer of 2021, I believe July, perhaps August. The event was put on as a company get-together. AA and blank helped organize this event. This was the first time I physically met Tim and Janet. Family was invited to the second portion of the event, which was held at Fat Cats in Saratoga Springs, south of Salt Lake City. There was a bowling session where families could mingle, followed by a screening of a couple of movie choices. I believe that this is the first time I watched Sound of Freedom since that was available as one of the options. I thought the movie was well done, but it seemed a little far-fetched and seemed like it probably took many liberties with the story. After the movie, I met Tim in the lobby. I was walking out with AA, and Tim was standing there with Blank and Matt Osborne, I believe. I cannot remember exactly how it happened, but I believe Blank stopped us and introduced AA to Tim, at which point I also introduced myself to him. What I vividly remember is how Tim sized me up at that moment and made some comment about my build. I remember because it seemed awkward and he stared at me for a little too long. In fact, Brad made the joke to stop staring and that he was being creepy. We all laughed. But as I walked away, I told AA that was weird, and she said, yeah. After the Fat Cat session, everyone met up at a lodge in Mill Creek Canyon for dinner. AA was running around making sure the food was properly handled, tables were set, etc. I helped with whatever I could, including setup and takedown. Tim gave a speech at the event, and it seemed very odd. It was very passionate and awkward at the same time. It seemed like some executive was just recently fired by the organization, and Tim seemed more concerned about berating that previous executive than anything else. It seemed very cultish and a tone of, you're either with us or against us, and don't question the company type of thing. I thought it was particularly odd to do this on stage in front of other employees, given that it seemed like an HR issue of sorts. During the mingling period, I had also met Janet Roussan for the first and only time in person. What stood out to me, especially in hindsight, was what Janet said to AA. After some brief conversation, she looked AA up and down and said, I have a feeling I'll be working with you a lot in the future. I chalked it up just to being kind of weird and did not think too much of it at the time. Now looking back, I get chills thinking about that moment. After the event, I remember AA blank blank husband and myself were left to do the final cleanup. I thought it was a little strange that Tim didn't stick around to help afterwards. I guess he was too important. Time with Tim Ballard. October 2021, evil enters our world. Sometime in October 2021, AA tells me that she was working late at the OUR building in Blank's office, and Tim walked in unexpectedly. Tim tells her that he had some sort of supposed revelation and that he saw her face and didn't even really know who she was, but he knew that she needed to be his next female operator in the upcoming mission. He tells her that he cannot believe she's here at this hour when he just happened to drop by, and that it has to be a sign from God. Oh my gosh. Sorry, y'all. Gotta stretch. AA asked me what my thoughts are about her going on a mission. AA asks what my thoughts about her going on a mission are, and my initial reaction was hell no. I remember her being somewhat disappointed and trying to convince me of all the reasons that it would be good. After some conversation, I felt like I couldn't deny her the opportunity to experience this, especially given her passion. I asked a multitude of questions and had many reservations about her going. I was especially concerned about her safety. I wanted to know details of the security team, how they operate, is she insured on these trips, what her role would be, why her out of all people, since she has no training in any sort of undercover work, no law enforcement background, and so forth. It was a huge red flag for me. But I also wanted to support my wife and not have her resent me for denying her this opportunity. I was given some assurances of safety and some vague answers, which were less than satisfactory, and largely probably due to the fact that AA was also not really given any straight answers. I very reluctantly agreed to the mission. After all, this was such a good cause, and they were trying to save kids. My only ask was that she check in with me as often as possible so I knew she was safe. AA went on her first practice mission to California to practice. I remember being somewhat frustrated with the lack of communication while she was gone. When she got back, she was excited that she did really well on the mission, and Tim told her she was a natural. She was so excited that she finally was going to be able to make a difference. Tim, of course, filled her head with visions of grandeur in regards to the impact she can have and how many kids she would be able to save. I asked AA why there was such a lack of communication and how we agreed how important that was. And she skirted around the issue, saying that she was extremely busy on the op, that things move fast, and that she couldn't really have her phone around, and that she was not able to think about being in her role and being a wife and mom at the same time, that contacting me would not allow her to be in character, etc. This became more of a theme as time went on, to the point where communication was almost completely broken between us. Again, with the benefit of hindsight, I know now that this was carefully orchestrated by Tim. He purposely isolated her, put her in uncomfortable situations, and sexually harassed her during that trip to build chemistry and make sure she was up for the job. Looking back, this was the first time in our marriage that I can identify as my wife purposely withholding information from me. She knew that if she had told me what really happened on that first practice mission, I would have put an end to it all. She also was sworn to secrecy by Tim to not share anything that happened, even with me, since people didn't really understand what it takes to save a child and the whole dark world they need to operate in. Tim began his grooming process with my wife. At one point, one of my coworkers, who has been with me as a confidant every step of the way through this, and I joked that if we didn't know any better, this would be the perfect cover-up for an affair. Exotic places, no communication, traveling with another man, all covered by the most noble of causes. How ironic that proved to be. Man, this shit sucks, reading this statement from this husband. Just thinking about the manipulation tactics and him trying to support his wife because she really, like, this shit sucks. I'm glad he had somebody he was talking to, though. Over the next few months, AA went on several more missions. One of them became progressively more frustrating, and the tension started to build in our home. She began to withdraw emotionally and physically. I felt like something was wrong, but we were unable to have real conversations about it. Many times when she would would talk about the missions, I would point out that it seems like she is being put in extremely dangerous situations. Things such as booking flights and hotels under her own name, Tim being a recognizable public figure, and possible danger of facial recognition, and so forth. I asked about security teams, and the answers seemed off. It just didn't sit right with me. I also started questioning why I never had any why I never had any interactions with Tim. It seemed odd. It got to a point where I finally said that if she continues to put herself in that kind of danger and disregard the potential impact that this can have on our family, then I would rather just bury my head in the sand and not know about it. She would later go on to say I never wanted to hear about operations, which was not true. I was never told the true nature of operations, only vague information that never added up. At one point, AA said she needed to get very provocative, almost nude, and have boudoir-style photos taken. That was a shock to me. I had major concerns about that and felt like that cannot really be a serious request. She said one of the traffickers they met said she could use the photos to infiltrate dark web sex rings. Tim thought it was the best idea and convinced AA she should do it. I was powerless to stop her. At one point, she contacted a photographer who wanted $6,000 just as hazard pay to take the photos because of the risk of them potentially being traced back to the photographer. Never mind the fact that my wife's actual face was about to be exposed to God knows what kind of danger. I tried to point out the extreme danger of doing this, but AA didn't want to disappoint Tim since he thought it would be such a great way to save more kids. Mind you, AA never got any additional hazard pay, life insurance, or anything during this time. As a matter of fact, she was kept a secret from many people at OUR. While she was doing these operations, Tim kept assigning her more and more administrative things to do. She was asked to juggle her regular job responsibility as blank and blanks while working on special projects for OUR, working on more personal items related to Tim, and being an undercover operator. Her time with the family deteriorated to almost nothing, and when she was home, she was not present. It started majorly affecting our relationship, the kids, the relationship with our friends, and with our extended family. I began to self-isolate as well because I got tired of the constant questions of, where is your wife? Can you have your wife text me back? Why isn't AA here, etc. Until recently, I've never heard the words couples ruse or been told the actual part AA played. I was told she was a madam of sorts. Again, the details always made the stories fall apart, but the more I tried to understand, the more tension it put on our marriage. Eventually, I just had to go along to get along. AA eventually transitioned to become Tim's full blank. She would do everything for him, getting his car detailed to taking him to doctor's appointments to picking up his medication. This transition was a mess in and of itself. She was promised multiple positions, bouncing back and forth for a while in a limbo state of frustration. She was told she would become the deputy COO for the company. Essentially, Tim wanted her to spy on everyone in the company. She was also promised huge raises, which never materialized. That would have become a theme during her time with Tim as well, especially in her time after leaving OUR and working for Tim Ballard or Spear Fund. Another theme that caused concern from my end was that people would turn over at rapid pace within OUR. Seemingly high-level positions seemed to be there one day and not the next, and out the next. Everyone was always out to get Tim. The only consistent good guy doing God's work was Tim. Anyone that dare question him would be disparaged beyond belief. I pointed this out to AA over time and said I didn't know who the good guys or the bad guys are anymore, but there seems to be only one constant. That didn't really sit well with her. Our conversations and arguments started becoming increasingly more Tim Ballard focused. I knew something wasn't right. I just could not properly navigate the conversation without it ending up being in an argument. AA would accuse me of accusing her of having an affair. I don't remember that really being a true possibility in my mind until about July, but I certainly felt like Tim was manipulating her in some way and that AA started to change to a person I was not able to recognize. The affection was almost completely gone. The conversations were all combative and defensive. The light that was once hers was not shining anymore. Many people around us observed similar things, although we kept things really private, so no one understood the extent of what was happening. I don't think we really even understood the extent of it all. In May of 2023, I won an all-expenses-paid trip to Cancun for me and a guest. I was extremely excited for the award and even more for the vacation AA and I could have on our own at this unbelievably beautiful resort. I ended up extending the vacation by 3 days on our own dime prior to us leaving so that we could have some extra time, much needed time alone. I asked AA on many occasions, can we please just set work aside for these 6 days and focus on us? Just disconnect and be together. I was promised that would be the case. It wasn't. Tim kept her occupied the whole time. It was hurtful and frustrating and caused more damage to our relationship. Oftentimes, Tim would call just to be consoled by her because of everything that was going on. I remember thinking, I'm your husband and I need you. He has a wife of his own. Let him talk to her. But if I brought it up, it would cause an argument. Around the same time, things really started escalating at OUR due to the sexual assault allegations brought forth against him, as well as the Sound of Freedom movie scheduled for release. I was told by AA that blank went on an operation with Tim and that she was now causing trouble making allegations against him. Eventually, Tim would be fired by OUR, which was later recanted to allow him to resign. I was constantly being told how the devil got into OUR and how Tim was being railroaded. I was told that Tim was fired because he held Blank's hand on an operation to protect their cover. That made zero sense, but I remember hearing AA and Tim on speakerphone discussing it, and Tim passionately stating that nothing happened. But HF is crazy. And that she's crazy like all the other crazies before her, and that he only held her hand. I would later learn this real story, but at the time, the story was very hard to accept. But again, my only option felt like believing to support my wife or risk ending the marriage. Those truly seemed like the only options. During the investigation period, Tim was obsessively calling my wife at all hours of the day and night. He needed continued reassurance that he would not be going to jail, that there would not be other women coming forward, and that he did nothing wrong. He talked about all the other women so often that I finally asked AA why he was so worried about other women if there was no truth to it, and that it seemed like there was something to the story. AA wouldn't hear it. And again, it became an argument over me hating Tim versus the facts of what was going on. Shortly after Tim was fired, he coerced AA to follow him on his new venture, which included Spear Fund. I heard him on multiple occasions telling her how much of an impact this will have, how much more free they can be to do actual work and that OUR doesn't do anymore, and how much money they would make and how much she would make. I remember at one point AA saying that they were going to at least double, if not quadruple my salary from OUR. That seemed insane, but okay. He also kept talking about fat bonuses she was about to get after the Sound of Freedom tour and making other extravagant claims. The whole thing seemed very shady. One time we were sitting in my car outside of the parents' home and AA and Tim were discussing pay. I told her to put it on speaker. Tim was talking about how she was going to get paid through Spear, and then he was going to also pay her through the Nazarene Fund, Glenn Beck's fund, as a supplement because no one watches that fund. I told AA that none of this sounds right, and is she sure she trusts him? I think A was just as confused at the time as I was, and was frustrated by that. On multiple occasions after that, I asked AA if she was sure she was hitching her wagon to the right horse. I believe by that time she had no other options but to trust him. This is really fucking sad, actually. Eventually, AA received a termination letter from OUR not long after Tim. It did not lay out any of the promises Tim made, specifically the negotiated 1-year severance that Tim promised. It actually laid out strong language that seemed like AA was getting fired and was not eligible for reemployment. I got really concerned about that and immediately reached out to AA. AA was on a plane with him when I reached out via WhatsApp. Tim assured her that it was all a mistake and spun it. Of course, again, I was becoming the bad guy by questioning him. This was all leading up to the release of the Sound of Freedom. If I thought AA was overworked or absent earlier, nothing really prepared me for what was to come. To say she worked 7 days a week, 20 hours per day is not an exaggeration. Communication between us became almost non-existent, and the only topic of conversation when AA was present was Tim's Sound of Freedom, the talk show circuit, the TV circuit, etc. There was so much excitement around it that what little AA was left for our family was consumed by that. I just have to put a note in here that this man is raising her children too. He's not the bio father of her children. I just have to give this man huge props for standing by his woman or attempting to, taking care of everything at home. Like this man, Kyle would have been out way before. Yeah, there's no way. The travel schedule got out of control. At one point, our 17-year-old son actually had a mental breakdown when he found out that AA was leaving again. I tried talking to her, but this was all too important. I couldn't wrap my head around why he always had to be with Tim, why she always had to be with Tim. She said he was unable to do anything by himself. He gets lost. He doesn't show up to places. And that he always needs her to be there. She was his employee, not his wife. It became very frustrating and painful, and honestly, something just seemed so off. I started thinking for the first time that maybe there was some sort of affair. If not physical, then perhaps emotional. It made no sense at all. At this point, they are not saving kids. They are not on missions. They are traveling around to build up Tim's brand and feed his ego. How could she not see this? The movie was bringing awareness, which I now do not believe to be true, since it's all fiction. But this was not what she was so passionate about. Moreover, Tim was having AA personally finance many of these trips with her own credit cards. I still to this day do not understand why he would put her in that sort of financial position. This caused a lot of issues between us, needless to say. Not only was AA working on a promise and a handshake with no actual income coming in, she was also forced to finance Tim's brand by paying for all the travel, hotels, restaurants, etc. during his Sound of Freedom tour. So there's going to be receipts. It was a source of intense friction between us, and somehow it always boiled down to her accusing me of accusing her of something. But the power this man had over her and the level of manipulation and brainwashing was unbelievable. This is wild. AA opened additional credit cards to keep financing things once her main card was maxed out. She put a total of close to $50,000 on personal credit cards, some of which was eventually reimbursed by Angel Studios and some by Tim's Rockwell company. However, for months, she carried his debt, financed his expenses, and it seemed like the reimbursement was always around the corner, but never quite there. I mentioned earlier that I've always been very debt adverse and financially conservative, so that put a lot of strain on our marriage and how we handled finances. It basically all spiraled out of control with no end in sight. In mid-July, AA left for New York for a screening of Sounds of Freedom with President Trump. She took my son because Tim promised him he could meet Trump. What a great guy. He was so excited, and all I could do was act excited for him. I even proudly shared a picture of my son with Trump on social media to support his experience. Inside, I was dying. I need my wife. She didn't need to be there, but it was cool, and Tim was cool, so I endured it. I decided to email her a letter explaining my feelings. It was a heartfelt letter explaining all of my feelings, admitting all the mistakes I thought I had made, trying to take blame for things that I may have done or said to add to our current state of our marriage. I laid out my feelings in distrust towards Tim and my desire to find a way back to each other. I never received a response. In late July, AA left for a work trip to Miami with Tim. She was supposed to return on a certain date, but her plane got delayed, then canceled. I helped her find another flight home, but then that flight also got canceled. I started getting suspicious, so I checked the flight tracker and noticed that it was not, in fact, canceled. I called her at her hotel, and it sounded like there were whispers in the background. I questioned her, and she got extremely defensive, and the conversation ended. I do believe the flight cancellation was legitimate. It just happened to coincide with some of the storms happening and was later verified. However, at the time, it didn't help my suspicions. I point this out because it all led up to what became the catalyst for a separation and path to divorce. That night, I had multiple panic attacks. I didn't know what was going on. My wife was gone, and I felt alone to fill in the gaps. I decided to book a flight to Alaska to visit some family there and be somewhere where I could feel safe. I stayed for 10 days and completely neglected my work duties during that time. I just needed to get my bearings. A good portion of the time was spent in bed, laminating or crying, not being able to sleep at night, mind racing about what was happening in my life, how we got here, how I could protect my wife from something I increasingly felt was dangerous and wrong. I wrote several notes to myself in my phone of my feelings at the time to process instead of sending them to my wife. because I was afraid of her reaction. I eventually shared them with her. We had several fights in Alaska, all centered around Tim. I was afraid of what I was going to come home to. I returned from Alaska on a Wednesday morning. AA opened the door and gave me a big embrace. I breathed a sigh of relief. We had a great 3 days afterwards until that Friday evening. AA stayed at work late and talked to Janet Roussan for a long time. I'm not sure of Tim's involvement at the time. She eventually returned home around midnight. I waited for her in bed till almost 2 a.m. Eventually, I made my way to the basement and asked her what she was doing. She said she was looking for hair color for her mom. At 2 a.m., I asked. She got frustrated and came to bed. I couldn't fall asleep after that. Something felt wrong and off again. I went downstairs and found her cell phone in the storage room for some reason. For the first time in our marriage, I decided to read through her text messages and check her call logs. I found that Tim had been texting her all night and asking her to call him when she got home. I was sick about it. He said he wanted to be there for her, but only if it helped her. It was all for her. She spent an hour on the phone with him after midnight. I was sick about it. I didn't understand. I thought we had a breakthrough, and then that happened. I walked upstairs and confronted her about it. I then proceeded to scroll through her phone and found multiple other inappropriate messages from Tim to AA. One was joking about hand jobs and blowjobs. Another was asking her if she had made love to an operator named Alex yet. It made me absolutely sick. I still didn't think there was an affair, but I also thought I was lying to myself. Why would her boss send her such inappropriate messages, sexual in nature? I knew at this time he was grooming her. I didn't know about what had happened on operations yet, but I thought this was him grooming her because he was able to manipulate her into thinking she was in a terrible marriage. I told AA that night I had enough. I wanted a divorce. The next day, we didn't speak at all, and the following Sunday, she left on a work trip again. I didn't really want a divorce, but I was desperate. I thought maybe if she understood the depth of the seriousness here, then she would snap out of this, but instead she left to be by Tim's side because he needed her there. At this point, I did confide in a few very close friends. They were absolutely stunned and shocked at what was happening. The common theme seemed to be they always knew how much I loved her, how glowingly I spoke of her, and how proud of her I always was. One said I was always her number one cheerleader through everything. So when things started unraveling, it seemed unbelievable. When they heard about why, it only got more baffling and confusing. I went to work the next day and wrote her another letter. Instead of filing for a divorce, I thought I would make one more appeal to her. I delivered the letter when she returned, and it was not well received. I know now it was because of Tim's manipulation. I asked her as a final plea to come with me to her parents' house to see if they can mediate some of this conversation between us. That also went terribly wrong. Later on, I found out some of that conversation, very private and intimate details, were shared with Tim. Tim then proceeded to ridicule and make fun of me behind my back to my wife. When we returned home, I checked her messages again. There was more of a conversation between Tim and her, more manipulation, more Tim wanting her to be there for her. At that point, I lost it. I confronted her wrongfully and loudly about the affair. I couldn't think of any other reason. It was not a good scene, and I deeply regret it. She took the kids and left the house and went to her parents. My son and mother-in-law came by later, and I spoke with them both. I apologized. My son and I cried. My son kept asking if we can please fix whatever is going on. He was so confused. He said how we have always all loved each other so much, and he doesn't understand what's going on. He said he knew it had to do with mom's work and Tim. I didn't want to go into it then, but I assured him I would do whatever I could to see if we can work it out. I also spoke with my mother-in-law, who asked that I just give AA some space. She said she'll realize her fault in this and come around. I agreed that I would do that, and I did. Before she left the house, I said something along the lines of, I know Tim for who he really is, and I'm going to expose him. Good for you, man. You deserve that day. The next day, I got a call from a work colleague at another bank. He sounded very concerned and said he didn't know what was going on. Oh, remember the Ecuadorian stuff? Well, here we go. The next day, I got a call from a work colleague at another bank. He sounded very concerned and said he didn't know what was going on, but was told that another one of his colleagues, blank, received a disturbing phone call about me. The caller said I was involved in some sort of assassination attempt on a political figure And because of my hacking and interference, multiple people's lives were at stake in Ecuador. This was insane. I went upstairs and opened AA's laptop, which was signed into her iCloud, and I found a message to her from Brad Barrett saying that he had contacted my industry, referring to me as AA's estranged husband, as well as numerous government entities to warn them of my hacking attempts and my involvement in the Ecuadorian incident. I was completely shaken and stunned. My hacking attempts consisted of looking at my wife's text messages on her phone and her iCloud, neither of which she was hiding. The phone had the same lock code on it as long as I could remember. This escalated to a level I had never imagined. I called AA, and she was also upset. She was aware of it and was working to fix it. I went and filed a police report about it with the South Jordan Police Department to protect myself. That same day, I called someone I knew and trusted who worked for OUR. I wanted to know if my intuition on Tim was correct or if I was completely off base. If I was wrong and Tim was a good guy, I wanted to know. If I was right, then I wanted confirmation. He confirmed all my feelings about Tim, and I asked if I wanted to talk to their current CEO, blank, since he might find this information helpful. I said, yes, I did. I was mad, frustrated, and I wanted to get answers. The next morning, I got a Facebook Messenger message from Blank's husband. He said, call me. We had never spoken before, but I knew who he was. I called him immediately, and the unraveling of all the information, all my fears started. I immediately asked Blank if Tim really only held Blank's hand, at which point Blank filled me in on the entire situation. He said Blank did everything with Tim, including oral sex and rubbing of genitals, stopping short of actual penetration. He told me about the couple's ruse, the spiritual manipulation, and the other women who wanted to come forward. Everything hit me like a sledgehammer. I asked if AA was ever a part of this, to which he answered, she was in the deepest and the longest. From what he heard, and said she was Tim's mistress for the better part of the year. I asked him to meet me in Lehigh, to which he agreed. I didn't want to believe it, but he showed me the text messages of some of the disgusting exchanges between Tim and Blank. It was clear that Tim was grooming Blank in the messages. AA and I were not speaking at the time, and she was ignoring me. So in desperation, I called RB, Tim's family member. I met RB before, and I knew AA and her were close. I wanted to know if any of this was true. RB confirmed the couple's ruse, but said she didn't know of an affair. Later that morning, I received a cryptic message followed by a threatening phone call. I hung up when that person wouldn't provide me their name. They called back and left a voicemail saying, I'm paraphrasing, that I had an easy way out. I should have taken the way out, that I will see how tough guys end up, that I'm a pussy, and that they will ruin my career in my industry. I reverse looked up the number and found out it was Brad Barrett, the same person who had told AA that I was responsible for hacking attempts in connection with the Ecuadorian assassination. I also found out that Brad was working for Tim and was previously employed by OUR. Yes, he was. When I informed OUR of Brad's threats, they were surprised he worked for Tim and said, they must be really scraping the bottom of the barrel to have Brad involved. Later that day, I met with Blank at OUR's headquarters around 4 p.m. A few minutes into the conversation, Blank, a lawyer from OUR, joined our meeting. David couldn't say much due to his gag order, but wanted to find out if what I was hearing about AA, Tim, Blank, and other women was true. Blank was unable to directly answer my questions, but there were some implications made that I was not wrong. I knew about Blank and no one there denied it. They said they never directly saw AA be inappropriate with Tim, but they said AA was the only one who defended Tim in her report to the investigator. I later found out that Tim made AA cover for him and withhold certain pieces of information. Again, I don't blame her given the level of manipulation I have now discovered by this man. Blank and Blank both said that Tim is a master manipulator. I later spoke with Matt Osborne, and the conversation was similar to the one with Blank. They both genuinely seemed concerned for me, for AA, for our marriage and situation, and were very sorry to hear what was happening. I asked at one point if they felt they needed to protect her and why they didn't. And their answer was that they tried, but Tim would basically bully everyone into submission to get his way. That also seemed to be the case with the firing resignation. All of this happened in early August, and life since then has been absolute hell. I've lived in fear for how Tim might retaliate. I took almost 2 months off work for mental health purposes, or mental health reasons, excuse me. I was able to perform my duties. I was unable to perform my duties. I completely neglected my responsibility. Thankfully, my employer has been supportive through the process. It has been humiliating having to explain to upper management why I'm unable to work or to not lose credibility with clients. I've had sleepless nights after sleepless nights, not being able to get through a full night's sleep without waking up and thinking about what has happened and what this monster has done. I've prayed for God to take me in my sleep on multiple occasions. My wife, my family was my life, and this man tried to take it away from me. For what? For his sick fantasies? Many times I felt like I was screaming underwater and no one could hear me. I felt powerless against him, against his resources and almost cult-like following in Utah. I fully understand why his victims are scared to death to come forward. I have heard him say before, they have one stone, I have 1,000. I've also been warned about Tim's vindictive nature and his readiness to bully and destroy anyone who dares to stand in his way. Until recently, AA has cut off communication with me, as did her family, who I thought was my family as well. When I tried to bring these things to light, I was gaslighted into thinking that I was crazy. I believe Tim was able to manipulate AA's family through AA. Her family and I always had what I believe to be a very good relationship. I was always first to help in any way I could, always pushing to spend Sundays with them, always looking forward to holidays, etc. I am deeply hurt how they have all turned on me. Her dad went as far as threatening me via text if I harmed her once when she and I were just talking. It was extremely painful. I am still uncertain how people you have known for so long, who know your character, who have seen how you've treated and loved their daughter and grandkids for 12 years, can turn so quickly. The only person to reach out to has been her brother to apologize for berating me in a call once. I told him I didn't care about that. Apology accepted, but I believed his sister was in danger. Regardless of what he had heard or thought of me, I wanted him to please at least consider that. He said he wasn't interested in being involved in our drama. I can only imagine that under the influence and direction of Tim, terrible things have been said about me. And this whole story is literally almost unbelievable. So a part of me doesn't blame them for not believing in it at the time. They have treated me like some sort of mentally disturbed criminal. All the while, I was just trying to protect their daughter and my family. But I know they now seen the reports, the news, and have spoken with AA. So hopefully their opinions change. Tim has repeatedly influenced AA and tried to manipulate her into getting the messages he knew I had regarding blank so that he can get ahead of it. When AA and I resumed our communication and I thought we were rebuilding our trust, he purposely used that to get information. At one point in time, AA told him she's running an op in her own home, asking him what information he wanted her to get and what he wanted her to do. I know this was not of her own doing, and that is now clear given recent developments, including her finally realizing who Tim is and what has happened. He made her believe I was controlling and manipulative myself. I think she started to see everything through that lens after a while, until she finally saw him for who he is. Tim would call AA obsessively day and night without boundaries. With what I have seen in limited text, I can only imagine what was said in hours upon hours of conversation. According to AA, most conversations centered around Tim, his mental state, his need for validation and comfort, and his issues. That doesn't surprise me at all given his narcissism, but I am sure it was deliberate to build trust, loyalty, and to manipulate them. He would even say things like, I'll put a bullet in my head if you ever leave me or betray me. AA would spend hours on the phone with Janet, the psychic, who I believe was Tim's enabler. I think he would often manipulate people through Janet. At one point, Tim actually suggested to Rad to get AA a divorce attorney who would purposely entice me to harass Tim in the Spear Fund so that Tim could retaliate against me. Even Rad thought that was probably going too far. That's a shocker coming from that fuck. That's my opinion, and I added that in there. Rad Barrett's a whole piece of shit, in my opinion, but we'll get into that another day. He also owns a bunch of like sports MRI clinics. Yeah, I wonder if Medicare and Medicaid have ever looked into him, but hey, that's for another day. Another interesting finding was stumbling upon some of AA's notes. And one in particular was extremely disturbing, especially when I read it without the benefit of context. The note was describing some sort of trance or spell Tim was under the influence of ketamine. He was talking to Nephi, Tom Harrison, the author of Visions of Glory, and others. He was talking about past lives and how he and AA were together in a past life held captive. He was saying that AA was an angel and chosen by Catherine to carry out these missions. The note dates back to January 8th, I believe, of 2023. It all lines up with the time he was grooming, harassing, and sexually exploiting her during his operations. Later, AA told me he had asked her to drive him to that treatment and to stay and to take notes. I believe he deliberately and purposely said those things he said during that treatment under the guise of not knowing what he's saying as a part of his spiritual manipulation process. Perhaps it didn't have the impact it expected because we are not LDS. I'm not sure, but I know it was calculated. I believe AA was a victim just as much as any of the other women. She was used, exploited, manipulated, coerced, and duped by the best of them. Tim does not care about anyone or anything besides himself, his image, and his money. He will use whatever he can for personal gain. Unfortunately, he has destroyed our marriage and our future because of his selfish narcissism. He broke relationships that meant more than anything to me. He affected my work and my ability to make a living. I have no idea if, how AA and I can find a way forward, but I know it will never be the same. Some things cannot be undone. And that is something that we will have to live with for the rest of our lives. I hope Tim realizes the depth of the destruction he caused to not only me, but to other husbands and the women he decided to victimize. And that is that. Hey, T. Hey, Grandma Sherry. Oh, yeah, there is for sure, SL. Absolutely. Huge cult-like following. This is the first one that we know of that was identified as a married one. There has been allegations that multiple marriages were harmed by this. I don't know if this is the divorced couple that was spoke about by like Jimmy Rex and Eric Moutsos or all of those guys or not, but this is, yeah. I mean, that is exactly what he did. Just reading the husband statement, I think really hits home because it was somebody that was watching things going on and had no control of it. And when he tried to save his own wife, they tried to destroy him. They tried to set him up for an assassination attempt. Like the levels this man will go to. Tim Ballard should not be feared. Tim Ballard is a Weasley little grooming piece of shit, in my opinion. Tim Ballard deserves to be shown for what he is. You want to talk about a groomer? In my opinion, that's exactly what he is. This is disgusting. Absolutely Moonlight View. He is absolutely a predator, in my opinion, too. I agree with that. It is disgusting to read this shit and to know that, you know, he had this hold over people. People will say it was consensual. No, this was very tactics. He used very divisive tactics to get what he wanted out of these women and replaced one after another to do it. There is no excuse for this. And the fact that so many of these people, like Matt Osborne, I keep thinking that had to have been a typo because Matt Cooper was the one that was always on the couples roosters in the previous ones. And Matt Osborne was the one that they said approached one of the previous victims at the gala with Dean Martin and called it out. Like, yeah, I think Hollywood should pick up the true story of Tim Ballard. I really do. I would love to do a documentary. I mean, I'm not Hollywood at all. Nowhere close, but I would support the shit out of that. Yes, T, last I heard, yeah, she is. I don't know how it's going to go. Let me see if she's posted anything recently on her Instagram. Let me look. It's been pretty quiet over there.
Marcus, you testified a moment ago to Senator
Oh,
every child.
He posted.
Piece of advice of how to find light.
Yeah.
He posted 6 hours ago. Least we forget the cause we are fighting for, God's children. You fucking creep. Stay away from our kids. Fucking creep. Absolutely. Hey, Mark. Brittany, that's a good possibility. Yeah, Tracy, it could be. I don't know yet on that. Let me see if there's anything else. It says public figure, public fucking nuisance, more like it. Absolutely disgusting. See if she's posted anything recently. No, she hasn't posted since October 3rd, and she posted a picture of their kids. A lot of their kids, here's the other scary part, y'all. A lot of their kids are teenagers. And I mean, Blaine is 23. Blaine's included in these documents. So, but a lot of them are teenagers. Oh, 2 of their kids are on missions. Oh, no, they're home now. Hold on, which one's which? Spanish-speaking missions too, missionaries. That sucks. It just sucks. Such a loving husband. But you know what? OUR helped victimize these women, in my opinion, because they never even vetted. I would love to know what he actually did with the Homeland Security. That is something that I would love to find out. What did he actually do for Homeland Security? Because FBI agents that have worked with him said he's not being truthful about that either. The LDS affiliation is a huge one because it was used. People believe in those prophets, especially Russell M. Ballard, who is, high up in the Quorum of 12. I mean, it's a big deal in Salt Lake. That is a huge thing. Tim Ballard is seen as some sort of folk hero. He's wrote all the, he's basically like unraveling like Christopher Columbus of the New World from the Mormon thing. Like, it's so gross. Yep. They were trusted and elevated into spotlight for what? For what? Because he could sell a good pitch? I mean, I'm going to take it back to this right quick. We're going to get into this a whole other day, but I'm going to end it on this. For those of you guys that don't remember, this is the whiteboard. This is the actual whiteboard. This one here from the whiteboard meeting. But American Crime Journal, which is Damian Moore, broke it down so it was easier to dissect. And this is what the whiteboard is. Slave Stealers LLC is a for-profit. Then you have Brian Norton, Tim Ballard, Russell Ballard, silent partner. Then you have the Children Liberation Fund, CEO Brad Damon. I can't see it. Executive Hada Vanessa, advisors Keke. Then it goes down to OUR, the Nazarene Fund, Children Need Families, Liberty and Light, Mercury One, Orphanage in Haiti. All of it goes to timballard.com. The Sound of Freedom movie, 50 to 100K for speaking engagements, and 3 to 5 new books coming out. $2.5 million bank account. This was all of what it was about. It's always been about Tim Ballard. It's always been about Tim and Tim's self-serving missions. That's all it is. Yep. This is one of the whiteboards. Kind of reminds you of the QAnon shit, huh? Wonder who idolizes him some more. And Tyler Feller, I got a new book for you to promote, but we'll get into that later. Absolutely, Tracy. 100%. That was PR for the church, in my opinion, too. I agree with you 100% on that. The church knew. He gave them a special blessing. They knew what was coming. This has been a bad couple years for the church PR, but it's about time they get in front of it, and they won't come out and denounce this type of extremist belief systems and this bullshit of Tom Harrison and the visions of glory and all these extreme lines of thinking that do not even align with true LDS thinking. If they don't do that, this is on them. They have in my opinion too, Russell, if this is true and it can be proven that he gave him this special priesthood blessing, that's a big fucking deal. And in my opinion would be complicit, but let's not take out of, let me put this back on the board too, because I want to take it home with this. Yo, Sean Reyes, Attorney General of Utah. You think your hands aren't dirty? Oh, buddy. Oh, dirty, dirty boy. Sean Reyes is the next one that needs to fall, and he needs to fall flat on his fucking face, in my opinion. He is a grimy, manipulative. He is way up there with the worst of all politicians. Whichever side you fall on, you can put him with your most hated politicians of the grimy, corrupt bullshit, in my opinion. That would be Sean Reyes, who has no business being Utah's Attorney General because he's conflicted out. Because Timmy Boy is his friend. Lil Tim. Oh, little Tim. And Timmy Boy, you better not ever size up another man. Let me tell you that. Because you a little bitch in your little skinny jeans. You better keep your sizing up for a real man. Because I tell you what, you ain't that. You ain't that at all. You a little bitch. To do this to women and to other men and then size them up like you're something. Dude, you're not even a washed up fucking Justin Bieber. You're not even a washed up, like you don't even qualify for that. Fuck out of here with that shit. I can't believe him. What an insecure little weasel. And please, men, stop that are built like him, that are probably like 5'2" in reality. Like he's a little guy. The only thing that's big on him is his fucking ego. Not his brain, his ego. I don't like that man at all. I never have, but it's just grown and grown and grown, my dislike for him. But the skinny jeans, y'all, please stop wearing those skinny jeans if you are Mormon and you wear undergarments and you look like that. That is like a typical LDS. And I can spot an LDS member from a mile away. There's a smell about him too. SL, are you still in here? You can, I don't know what it is, but you can smell. There is a certain smell about LDS men. I don't even understand it. I've said this before, but it is true. Maybe, I don't know. It's crazy. Hey, Bridget. It's so good to see you. I hope you're doing well. I've missed so many of you guys. I hope you're doing good. Nikki, it's terrible. I don't like these people, okay? Absolutely, Steph. Abso-fucking-lutely a vile predator, in my opinion. Yep, 100%. 100%. And I'm glad that these women are telling their stories. And I'm glad that this husband came forward. And I hope more do. And I hope the discovery process, we are going to make it as loud and uncomfortable for all these people. Hey, Glenn Beck. Glenn Beck. You want to talk about the Nazarene Fund and know how nobody watches the fund over there? Glenn Beck. I can't wait. There's so many pieces of this I cannot wait to talk about at all. Like this gives me joy, y'all. You don't even understand. It is the products they use. It is. People think I'm losing my mind when I say that. But after living in Utah, we just moved at the end of August, the very end of August. So we were part of the West Point Ward, by the way, just for those of you that want to know. And I loved the bishop there. Like, again, this isn't to do with every Mormon. A lot of Mormons are really amazing people. However, there's a lot that aren't either. I know, Holly. And here's the thing, like, we got to open this up and think about, what about the victims in the other countries? What about the female operators before 2021? Where are the 223 kids that they supposedly brought in? And by the way, I have a whole thing that we're going to talk about with children and families and the Ukrainian bullshit when the Ukraine war broke out. We've got that to talk about. We've got so many things to talk about with this because there's so many pieces of corruption and misinformation and fraud and all of it, in my opinion. It is. Oh, Sean Reyes needs to fall flat on his face. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Nikki, it's all about numbers for them. 100%. That's why they keep calling me. They don't really want me. They just want to keep me in check. They really don't want me, because here's the thing. Kyle and I are not legally married, so we could never be baptized until we were married. We are living in sin. Kyle cannot even, or they can't, the missionaries can't even come in our house because I'm a single female if Kyle's not here. So Kyle has to be here, which I'm actually glad for the missionaries' sake that they do that, because you just don't know where they're going to end up. But until Kyle and I, but they want my girls. They absolutely want my girls. And Utah has one of the highest populations of kids with autism too, which is really scary because they baptize these kids and then they're in their system for life and they don't get to make decisions that are consenting decisions. That is bullshit. Bullshit. And it pisses me off that they use and abuse so many with developmental disabilities in that church. And then you just are told to pray it away, right? Pray it away. By the way, if you want a book that helps you pray away all your medical illnesses, Tyler Feller, listen up, you little freak. It's called A More Excellent Way, Be in Health by Henry W. Wright. We'll get into that later and why I'm talking about that. And you guys are going to freaking die when you hear more about this shit. But yeah. Yep, Tracy, for sure. Britt. They kind of have a little bit of a similar look. They really do, honestly. And they're fucking weird. I would not put that on Uni that he's a groomer, though. I will not. Like, I don't like him at all. But looks wise, yes. Whack job, yes. But I genuinely don't think Uni would ever do something like that to females. I would never put that on him. So thankfully, he would never be that way. But they do resemble each other. I'll give you that. And he does think he's kind of a tough guy, that's for sure. It's little man syndrome, okay? It's just a thing. Especially with skinny jeans. It's a thing. It's definitely a thing. All right, y'all, I'm out of here. I will see you guys later today, probably this evening on my other page. We're just going to have some fun and some bullshit laughs. I got some funny things to talk to you guys about and some things that I want to break down and talk to you about with some of the stuff that I said yesterday. I got an email about it and I want to explain why I feel the way I do about certain situations, you know. Yeah, I know. That's why I was like, he could play him in the movie because of the similar resemblance, but they are nothing alike. They are nothing alike in that capacity. Their whole like persona, the little weird red hair. That's just from Bleach, though, to be honest. Rachel, it's terrible. Yeah, no. I would never. Yeah, no, you're totally fine, Britt. I got you. I was just saying, like, walking through it, like, we're on my main page, Nikki. We're on the Nonsense on the Web page. It'll be on my other page. Revival. We don't start rumors on the island. No, not especially not about that. When this guy is this terrible, we don't ever want to compare him. He's bad enough in his own right. Like Tim Ballard gets all of this. He gets all this attention because he deserves it 100%. And all the guys that helped him cover it up for all this time, they deserve what they get out of that for sure. Uni might be a shitty person, but he ain't nothing like this. I haven't made any more yet, Britt. I have been all over hell and back. All right, y'all, I am out. I hope you guys have a wonderful afternoon, and I will see you guys later today. No, Nikki, you're fine. It's called All the Nonsense, Tracy. It's shared in my community page, I think, on this one. I can share it again. Thank you, Aurora. I hope you had a great day at work. I hope you guys all have a wonderful rest of your day. And for those of you guys I see later, it's just called All the Nonsense. It's basically I'm separating out like the stupid content and like the drama bullshit that they keep trying to pull me back into and the dumb speculation and the rumors and the little poking weird creator shit. I'm keeping that over there and more of like my personal stuff. Thank you, T, on that page, and keeping this to more like focused content on things that actually matter. Bye, Daisy. Have a great day. See y'all later.